Okay, I think we've got a few people joining us now. Welcome to this webinar. My name's Sue from the Gut Cancer Foundation. We've got Sean Robertson joining us tonight. He's a nutritionist and works with 4 Wheels of Health, who are partnered with the Give It Up campaign. Just a bit of housekeeping as we get started off. We are recording this webinar, and we will be sharing the link to the recording via email tomorrow and into the Facebook group, and there's a blog post on the Give It Up website. So thank you for joining us. I've just had a couple of technical issues. I did have a couple of slides to share with you on the Give It Up campaign and a little background to the Gut Cancer Foundation. Unfortunately, I was having some problems sharing my screen, so I'll just talk to it anyway. The Give It Up campaign and the Gut Cancer Foundation, this is the 3rd year that it's been going. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the why we have the Give It Up campaign. Now, gut cancers are cancers of the digestive system, going from the esophagus down to the stomach, the pancreas, the liver, the gallbladder, bile ducts, and the bowel. And unfortunately, 6,000 New Zealanders are diagnosed with these cancers every year. That equates to 17 a day. The number of people getting diagnosed with these cancers is increasing. For those of you that were involved in Give It Up last year, you'll know that the figure last year was 15 a day. We got recent figures from the Ministry of Health in December, and that has increased to 17 a day. Gut cancers make up about 22% of all cancer diagnoses, and sadly they have some of the poorest survival rates of any cancers. And that's something we were trying to change through this campaign. It has been estimated that approximately 50% of gut cancers can be prevented with lifestyle choices, and hence the Give It Up campaign came about, where we want to raise awareness about the links between diet, exercise, and healthy living have with your risk of getting this group of cancers. So a couple of things to say about the impact you're going to have taking part in this campaign. Hopefully by the end of the Give It Up month, whether you're giving up sugar, booze, or the sofa, or some people are giving up all 3, you will have kickstart some healthy habits that will see you through the long term as well. Through those healthy habits, you will hopefully be reducing your own risk of getting a gut cancer. So that's benefit number 1, is the benefit to your own health of taking part. Number 2, the funds raised from this campaign will all go towards supporting essential research into finding better ways to detect, diagnose, and treat this group of cancers, and hopefully in the long term improve those poor survival rates. Predominantly the research that we fund is clinical trial research, and clinical trials are really important because they take findings in the lab and bring them to the bedside and give access to patients to new treatments, perhaps up to 5 years earlier. And that's really important for a patient. Perhaps they've exhausted all other treatment options before being put on a clinical trial or giving the option of a clinical trial, and can often be a last attempt at extending their life or even saving their life. Clinical trials don't come cheap, and there's very little funding for them in New Zealand, and it costs on average between $1,000 and $10,000 per patient on a clinical trial. Now, previous participants in Give It Up have funded 47 patients onto clinical trials, and our aim from this year's campaign is to raise $350,000 to enable many more people to have access to these clinical trials and treatments that they wouldn't otherwise have access to. So huge thank you to everyone taking part and for your fundraising efforts thus far. As I say, the minimum amount is $1,000. Now, some of you may have seen your fundraising badges that are on your fundraising pages. We have a level set at $1,000 champion fundraiser, and you are a champion fundraiser if you reach that amount, because you are effectively giving another fellow Kiwi an opportunity to go on a clinical trial. So thank you again. The third element of the campaign, which again is a really important one, is the awareness raising. So simply by taking part, sharing your story through social media or through email out to your contacts, you're talking about this group of cancers and why it's important to you to take part in the campaign. And that in turn helps to raise awareness and gets people talking about perhaps symptoms that they've experienced, or family members that they've known, or family members or friends that have been impacted. So it gets the conversation going. So that's three really key important elements to the campaign. Thank you for your support. We've got a couple of days before the start of March. And I'd now like to hand over to Sean, who is a little bit of introduction to Sean. He is a nutritionist with 4 Wheels of Health. He supported the campaign the last couple of years. So if you've done it before, you'll be familiar with his face. But we've asked him along tonight to share with us some tips for the month ahead, whether you're going sugar-free, booze-free, or sofa-free. Now, I should just point out before I hand over to him that you have got a Q&A function. I will keep a monitor on the questions, and as they come through, we will not interrupt Sean, but maybe at the end we will talk through some of those questions coming through. So over to you, Sean.
Yeah, cool. Hello, everyone. So my job essentially with you guys for this Give It Up campaign is to help get you off on the right foot, help you through any of the speed bumps that can come along throughout the journey. And there's the potential as well, because we'll be doing these Zoom sessions live each week, but there is the potential for me to, if there is interest from you guys, and please let us know using the Q&A function if you are interested in this, I can do some extra videos like mini lectures in the Facebook group live, where you can ask questions as well on gut health and everything that links to it. So if there is interest around that, please let us know, because then, you know, it's not just about fundraising, it's also about, for you, you know, being healthier and learning about gut health and what actually happens in the gut and how you can improve it for your own health and how that links to every other area of your well-being. So yeah, if there's interest, we'll definitely be able to provide that kind of information for you. If there's any health nerds in here, as well as myself and Sue. So I'll keep this video pretty point to point, just out of respect for your time. But these are basically just, I'm going to be running through the different tips of what you can do to get started around alcohol, sugar, and the sofa. So whichever one you're choosing to give it up, if not all three, if you're being very, very brave. So when it comes to alcohol, it's whether you are someone that just drinks on the weekends, or you just like to have a beer or a cider or wine at the end of the day, you know, you're giving up it completely for this time period. And one of the main things that makes it hard is because drinking is often something to do. So what is a really powerful way to deal with this essentially is to replace that, because a lot of the reason that we like alcohol is because it releases dopamine. It gives us a reward hormonally, and our body enjoys that. So replacing whatever you would normally be doing when you're drinking, replace it with something else. It could be a new hobby. It could be a hobby that you had before that you might want to start up again. It's just about finding something else that you can do instead, or if you really just like having the beverage aspect, finding a non-alcoholic replacement that could be beneficial. And obviously I'm going to recommend something like kombucha or kefir, because it's still fizzy, but then it also has benefits for your gut health as well by providing you with bacteria. So replacing what you are missing rather than going completely cold turkey. If it's a habit that's very regular for you and you know it's something that you might find hard to give up, replacing is very, very key here. It's also very hard to give up drinking if the people you are living with are continuing, because drinking is generally a social thing. And yes, I'm a nutritionist, but of course I'm going to have a few drinks here and there as well. And the social aspect is one of the reasons it's so consistently in our lives. So the right thing to do here, the best thing you could possibly do in this aspect would be to get the people that you are living with to do this with you. Say, just say, like, this is important. I really want to do this. I want your support. I don't want to be surrounded by maybe they're not actively peer pressuring you, but just by them being around you and drinking, it can make it harder. We are social creatures, and it's something that is going to influence us. So getting them on board as well is going to be quite a powerful tool. It's about removing temptation, because we are not always, as much as we like to think we would be, we are not always going to be in the right state of mind to resist temptation. And that is why, as human beings, we don't always do what we know is best for us, because sometimes the emotional part of the brain does take over rather than the logical part of the brain. Finding your motivation. So this actually applies to the entire campaign. So it's very hard to stick to something if you don't know why you're doing it. And yes, you could say, okay, well, you've signed up because you want to, create a positive impact. It just sounds like a really, really good-hearted thing to do. But you also want to find your personal reason why giving up these things is going to help you. What do you just want to be healthier? It could be that someone that is affected by any of the things that Sue has just mentioned, and you're doing it for them. Common one is, if you have kids, you want to be healthy for your kids. So whatever it is, you have to find out and maybe have a little, internal conversation with yourself. What is the reason? What is the motivation? And maybe even write it down, post it on the fridge or on your bedside table. But just have it as a reminder. So anytime when you feel like you're going to slip up, you can lean back on that, because knowing your why is one of the most powerful ways to keep consistent at something. Now, when it comes to temptation, this is one sometimes easier said than done. But for alcohol, it's pretty straightforward. If it is in your house, if it is in the areas that you spend a lot of time, maybe at work, unlikely but possible, you want to remove alcohol. You could put it all in a box, depending on what kind of collection you have, and give it to someone to hold on to, and say you want it back at the end, if you do want it back at the end. But not having it there is the easiest way to not be privy to actually drinking it. Because if it's not there, you can't have it, right? So when you go shopping, you're not going to buy it. If it's not in your house, you can't drink it. And that makes it so much easier on the days where maybe you've had a really hard day and you just want to say, I just need a drink. I just need a single drink. But if it's not there, you can't have it. So knowing your own limitations in that sense of controlling yourself, because we are imperfect. So removing the temptation is a really good way to set yourself up for success. Now, when it comes to sugar, and this point does actually apply to alcohol as well when it comes to willpower, because that's when we recover it, is during our sleep. So getting a full 8 hours sleep is a really great way to not crave sugars, or to cull a lot of the sugar cravings that you get, because sugar is one of the most addictive substances on the planet. It is more addictive than a lot of Class A drugs. And we know this through experiments, social experiments with humans, but then also with animals. They'll choose sugar over different various drugs all the time, consistently. So it's very, very addictive, and it is arguably the hardest one to give up. That's the one you're choosing. So we want to avoid sugar cravings. And this is a hormonal issue because our hormones mixed with the bacteria in our gut are what cause our sugar cravings. Sleep is one of the main ways you can control this. So when you are getting a full night sleep, 8 hours, then your hunger hormones and your cravings are normal, and they're not going to exacerbate this desire for sugar. When you have slept poorly, your body instinctively craves more sugar to kind of supply more energy and make up for the repair that it hasn't gained during the night because you haven't slept well. But then also because your hunger hormones play up, or they get imbalanced, it causes you to crave sugars and generally more unhealthy foods when you're tired. So if you're getting good sleep, then that's going to be a priority for you if you're giving up sugar. It's I can't emphasize this enough. Sleep really is the gateway to not just removing sugar cravings, but weight loss in general, if that is a primary or secondary goal for you. Another way is to kind of trick the brain, and that you do this by having more proteins and fats. So because you're cutting out sugars, you still want energy in your diet, and luckily fats have twice as much energy as sugars, and proteins have the same amount. However, fats have what we call a far higher satiety rating in the brain. This is really, really cool because it means that the more fats you have, so the more olive oil you put on your salad or that you're cooking with, the more avocado you have, or it could be if you have coconut oil in your, or MCT oil in your coffee, if you like those bulletproof coffees, if you've heard of them, the more fats you have in your diet, the less hungry you are, because fats cause the hunger hormones in the body to be released more that tell your brain that you are full and you don't need to eat anymore. So proteins do this as well, much, much better than carbohydrates or sugars. So if you are cutting out sugars, have more fats, have more proteins. This is a rabbit hole to get into in itself, and I won't tunnel down, but if you're thinking, oh, but fats are bad, not true. Fats are like a more efficient and cleaner form of energy than sugars, and you won't get the insulin release from fats that you do from sugars, which is what causes weight gain. So you do not gain weight because of fats, even though they are high energy. You require hormones to tell your body to use the energy and put it in fat cells, but you don't get it from fats. So high fats, high protein, that's going to help with your hunger cravings, especially around sugar. And unironically, weight loss normally comes up as a part of that, although it's not what our aim is for this this framework that we're going through here with the alcohol, sugars, and the sofa, but it is a bonus if that's something you're after. Probiotics, this is a really good one, links into gut health. Your sugar cravings, like I said, are often dictated by the gut bacteria that you have, and probiotics are basically putting more good bacteria into your gut. The more good bacteria you have in your gut, the better the balance is between the good and the bad bacteria, and the more you're going to crave things like more natural foods that contain fiber and antioxidants, because that's what those bacteria crave, as opposed to what the bad bacteria crave, which is mainly sugars. So probiotics and also what we call prebiotics, you can get both in supplement form. They will help with these sugar cravings. People do take chromium supplements, which can help, but I find that in practice, probiotics generally help a lot more and is more long-term. So get your hands on some probiotics for the start of this if you are giving up sugar. So if you're still just giving up sugar, then drinking plenty of water is going to help, as well as piling up your plates with vegetables. And the reason for have more water, have more vegetables in your meals is to stretch the stomach, because when you stretch the stomach, again, you release certain hunger hormones that tell your brain it's full and it doesn't want to eat anymore, and that is going to help you curb any of the sugar cravings that can come up. Because especially giving up sugar, and this is why I say it's one of the most addictive things on the planet, is because it's not just that you're changing what your body is used to, but you are having to fight the bacteria cravings as well. And the messages that you get from the bacteria in your gut are very, very strong. So you need to do everything you can to support your own willpower here and kind of stack the deck in your favor. Now, the last one is healthier alternatives to sugar. So generally, I say, rather than trying to replace sweetness, aim to not desire it as much, because as animals, and that's what we are, sweetness in nature is very, very hard to find. Most things in nature, even fruits in their unaltered form, so before we genetically modified and selectively bred them, they're normally very sour. They were not very sweet, normally just filled with seeds, weren't that they weren't that sweet. So sweetness should be a rarity. And when you cut down on sugars and you stop having them so often, things that would normally be mundane actually start to taste really sweet. Like if you go a month or two without sugar and then you have like a carrot, and it blows your mind how sweet a carrot actually is, but we're so desensitized to it. So rather than replacing, I advise just removing and trying to develop a more savory kind of palate than what we call a sweet tooth. Although if you are looking to replace, fiber syrup is a really good option. Fiber syrup is almost all fiber, very, very low GI, quite easy to get your hands on as well. You can use sweeteners, but they do still have an effect on your insulin, so it will still affect weight loss and your blood sugar levels. Stevia is the only exception, but that still has some question marks around it as well. So unless you're using the more natural ones like jackfruit sweetener, it can be pretty iffy. So I would advise, if you are going to try and find a replacement, the best one would be like those fruity teas that you can get if you just need something sweet. They contain very little sugar and they can actually be quite, sweet tasting. So if you really, really need something sweet, that would be it. The teas that are like the fruity ones, like strawberry and blackcurrants and whatnot. Now, when it comes to the sofa and giving that up, well, you kind of need to book in a time each day to be active and stick to it. Because if you say, oh, okay, well, I'll be active every day, but you have to ask yourself, okay, but when? When can you actually do it? Because it's very easy to say, oh, I'll do it after work, and then something happens. And you need to find a time where you absolutely know that every day you are going to be free at that time, undisturbed, no one's going to mess with it. That's really, really crucial here. If you don't have that time locked in where it can't be moved, then things are always going to be able to pop up to displace it. So you need to find a time during the day that you are committed to exercising. And, even if it's just brisk walking or maybe, just leisurely swimming, a very gentle bike ride, or as opposed to, like a pump class, or you're really having a hard gym session, it doesn't matter as long as you're being active and you can get it in. That's the main thing, is can you actually have time to do it? Because generally this day and age, we're pretty busy and it's very easy for life to get in the way, as we say. Now, your exercise doesn't have to be in the gym. You don't have to get a gym membership, for this. It can be anything about being active. I mean, the studies are very, very clear on this. Even just 2 half-an-hour walks per week had significantly more positive impacts on all areas of health compared to doing nothing at all. And that's just walking for half an hour twice a week. So if you're doing this, and then obviously it's exponentially better. So doing that every day is going to be tenfold. Don't quote me on that, but tenfold better than just the 2 times a week. So it doesn't have to be in the gym. It could even be walking the dog, be playing with your kids. You just have to be active. It could be that you've got lots of stairs at work and you choose to take the stairs up to the 7th floor and back down every time you go in and out of the building for a lunch break, getting to work, leaving work. It could be that, and that could add up to 20 minutes a day. So it could be walking or biking to work instead of driving. So it doesn't have to be in the gym. It can be forms of activity outside of intentional exercise. So you can make these little changes throughout your lifestyle to say get your steps in. I know there are a lot of step challenges out there and step apps as well. It's a good one to install. You can get things that count the steps that you've had each day, and you aim for 10,000 or 15,000 a day. And if you haven't hit it by the end of the day, then you go out for a walk. So it's a good way to do it as well, and it keeps you accountable too. Now, speaking of accountability, it's a lot easier to stick to something, especially if you're not normally exercising every day, is to have a buddy, someone you live with, someone close by, just a friend that you can meet up with every day. Find a buddy for this. And this is, if you don't have one right now, then go find someone that you know that will do this Give It Up challenge with you. And they may say no at first, but give them a push. Like it can be fun, like doing something, you're having some quality bonding time. We're social creatures, so no one ever goes and exercises and then regrets it afterwards. You always feel good after. So find a buddy, and you can hold each other accountable. Sometimes you'll be having an off day, sometimes they'll be having an off day, but this is why having a gym partner or just a workout buddy is really, really good. We, ironically, as humans, we are better at being accountable to others than to ourselves. We do more for other people than we do for ourselves, which is a really, really funny thing, because we often accuse ourselves of being more selfish creatures, but we're really, really not when it comes to accountability and social acceptance. So workout buddy is really, really good for that one. And the last one here is just to reward yourself. And I don't just mean giving yourself a pat on the back, but this plays into the dopamine system in your brain as well. Is if you know that every time you exercise, you will reward yourself with something. I don't mean something sugary, obviously I'm not going to encourage that, but something that you like. It could be time spent on a certain activity that you really enjoy that you don't normally make time for, you can't do as much. It could be a certain type of food. It could be going out to somewhere. You could make deals with your partners that, if I work out, like, can this be my reward? So a reward system is really good too, especially around exercise, because you have something to look forward to after the physical exertion that you have to go through. So this will be put in the group. Is that right, Sue?
Yeah, hold on. I will just bring myself back on here. So, yeah, we'll be putting the recording into the group. We do have some questions, Sean. So,
okay, hang on, just before we get into that, I was just going to say, if you haven't made notes of these tips, then feel free to rewatch when it's in the group and make some notes. But even if you just take on a few of these tips, like, they really, really do help. Every little bit counts. So we get into the questions.
Yeah, just before we jump into them, just if we've had people join after the start. So we are recording this and we'll be sharing it in the Facebook group. It'll be emailed out to you, the recording, and it'll also form a blog post on the Give It Up website. So if you need to go back and check that. One other thing I'll just say before we move into the questions is that this is the first in a series of webinars. So Sean's touched on a few sort of overview points, things about gut bacteria, gut microbiome. We've got a whole session on that, I think, in 2 weeks' time. So if that particular area of this challenge interests you, we'll have a full session on the gut microbiome in a couple of weeks. Next Monday night, we're going to have a whole session on cravings and how to deal with them. And I think in 3 weeks' time, we're scheduled to talk about sleep in more detail and some tips to improve your sleep, because as Sean alluded to, it's quite fundamental to everything, sleep. So we've got a whole session on that. So we'll just have a quick look through some of the questions here. So yeah, there's a couple of people interested in more detail on gut health, so watch out for the webinar coming up on that. Question here from Joe, are there any supplements you can take to reduce sugar cravings? I guess you probably answered that, have you, with the probiotics?
The supplements, I mean, you can take chromium supplements, but I wouldn't really recommend it because it's more about blood sugar control rather than cravings. The cravings generally come from your gut, and I will explain that in a future webinar when I talk specifically about the gut microbiome and how the bacteria that live inside of you influence you on a chemical level in your brain to desire certain foods. So the best way to reduce sugar cravings is to improve your gut microbiome, so the bacteria that live inside your gut, and probiotics and prebiotics are the way to do that. So they're two different things. Probiotics is when you're adding bacteria, it's an actual bacteria in a supplement. Prebiotics, PRE, that is the bacteria food. So then you're feeding the good bacteria in your gut. And the more of those you have, the more they can compete the bad bacteria. And so your sugar cravings go down and your cravings for more healthy foods go up. So that makes it a lot easier. There's no supplement in existence at the moment that you can easily take to deal directly with craving sugar, unless you want to get into some pharmaceutical areas that I'm not specialized in, and I generally avoid getting into the artificial stuff if at all possible.
So Joe, or anyone else that's interested, be sure to tune in next Monday evening for the session on cravings for a bit more information. We've got a couple of questions from Bryony. If you're drinking kombucha every day, plus having a probiotic every day, is it possible to overdo the bacteria?
Yes, very, very good question. You absolutely can. You can get something called bacterial overgrowth, which is where you just have too many bacteria living in the gut. It's a bit like if you think of an overpopulated city, there's too many people, not enough housing. Similar thing can happen in your gut and you don't feel very well. So with kombucha, you can have one every day if you're not having probiotics, but generally 1 every 2 days is probably a better bet. And as for probiotics, you normally only need to take a probiotic supplement, like once you take a pack, which is normally 30 days, right? You take that once every 6 months or once every 3 months at a maximum, because you don't need to be adding bacteria all the time. Once you've added the bacteria, they will grow by themselves. The amount of bacteria in these capsules is tiny compared to the amount of bacteria in your gut. You have about 100 trillion bacteria in your gut. You get a few billion from these capsules. So it's a drop in the ocean. The important thing is the introduction of different types of bacteria. That's why the supplements are good, because you're introducing new types of bacteria that do different things for you. They will grow on their own if you keep feeding them, what they want, which is fiber, generally, fruits and veggies.
Okay, great. Thoughts on erythritol and allulose for sweeteners, both natural and from what I've read do not cause insulin spikes. Your thoughts on that, Sean?
Yeah, I generally stick to the ones that are more, like you can get certain sweeteners that come from jackfruit. There's another one that the name eludes me. It's a really strange name. Then there's stevia, which is fine in small amounts. Anything more than a small amount is too much anyway in terms of sweetness. So those are the ones I generally stick to. If they are not causing insulin spikes, like for example, these ones here, they're going to be much better than, for example, like the sweeteners that you'll find in, Coke Zero or any of these kinds of fizzy drinks. So I would much prefer you have those than any of the more artificial ones that do have a really significant impact on your blood insulin levels. I'm always kind of cautious with sweeteners in general, because even if, for example, they don't spike insulin, and that's great, a lot of the time sweeteners, they're not as thoroughly studied, especially the newer ones, as they could be. So we don't know what the long-term effects of taking a lot of them are. So I will give a tentative yes, that's fine. Like I would personally have them, because if you worry about every small thing throughout your life, you're going to be a worry worm and not enjoy yourself. But just take it with a grain of salt, that we don't know exactly what the long-term effects could be. It's probably fine, but it's just kind of a small question mark that, you should always be a bit skeptical of all these different sweeteners.
Okay, so question from Carla: with sugar-free, can we use honey and fruit? I think I'll just preempt your answer a bit there, Sean, and just say, in terms of this challenge, the aim is for you to take steps that are going to be sustainable for you. And, we've talked about on the website and in the group aiming for under 10 grams of sugar per 100 grams. Fruit is very important as fiber for your gut. But Sean, maybe you can talk a little bit about honey, and I think someone else has asked about maple syrup as well, as I guess seen as natural sweeteners.
Yeah, so maple syrup, definite no. Honey, I wouldn't either. If the purpose is to cut out sugars, they are. I mean, honey, maple syrup, those two things are almost entirely, it's just sugar through and through, basically, right? It's syrup. So that's how thick the sugar is. It's become a syrup. So I wouldn't have those. Yes, you can argue that they're natural, but we're trying to cut out sugars here, and that's what they are. In terms of fruit, it's a little bit more of a gray area, because yes, as you said, they contain fiber. They also contain lots of different antioxidants, which are really, really good for gut health. I would include fruit in your diet, even during the zero sugar, because it's more about the hard-hitting sugars. And the reason I don't class fruit, so I would exclude fruit juice. So if you have fruit juice, take that out, but include whole fruits. And the reason for this is, and the reason why I would include fruit, is because yes, it contains sugars, but the type of sugars it contains is fructose. It's 1 point, which acts differently in the body to the other sugars, say like table sugar, sucrose, glucose. The way you process them and their effect on insulin is different and less, it makes you less prone to weight gain than the other sugars. Also, because they contain fiber, it makes the sugars they do contain more slow release, and that's why the juice isn't so great, because it's just liquid sugars, just like Coca-Cola or fizzy drinks. It's very quickly absorbed by the body. You get a huge insulin spike. Not great at all. So yes to fruit, no to fruit juice, and then no to maple syrup or honey for this challenge. Okay.
Protein bars, question mark. What are your thoughts on protein bars?
If you have nothing else, like if it's a choice between a protein bar and a Big Mac, I'm going to choose the protein bar. But a protein bar compared to, a small meal of natural foods, then obviously the more natural alternative is going to be better. And yeah, the protein bars, they look good on paper, but if you read the ingredients list and what it contains, generally, and I haven't seen every protein bar brand, so please don't berate me if you've found a really, really healthy one. If you have, I would love to know what it is. But generally, they contain, yes, high protein. However, the protein is generally very low quality, which means that it doesn't contain a lot of the essential amino acids that we need. It contains just a few types. So amino acids like mini proteins that build into bigger proteins. So the mini ones, some are essential, some are less important, some you can make in your body yourself. And the protein bars generally contain the less important ones because they're cheaper. Not only that, they do also usually contain a lot of sugars, as well as all the additives to give it its consistency. And I am not a fan of all the preservatives and everything they generally contain, and I can talk about that in the future gut health videos.
Great. Another question.
Hang on. Sorry, just for the short answer, if there is no healthier alternative, then protein bars okay, but otherwise I'm not a fan of them at all.
Okay. When trying to give up sugar, can you have kombucha? I think we've already talked about that, have we? Does some have more sugar in them than others, or?
Yeah, they do. So it's actually fine, like you said, depending on the sugar content. So this is important. When you see the nutrition label, because some of the kombuchas have almost as much sugars as like just fizzy drinks, right? They're very, very sweet. But there are some brands that are really good and are completely fine, even if you're giving up sugar. And there's a brand called Remedy that I really like. I'm not living in New Zealand at the moment, so we don't have it here. But it's a really good brand for the sugar content. It's called Remedy. Now, any kombucha or any drink for that matter, what you want to do, look at the nutrition label, and per 100 mils, it'll say per serving and per 100 mils. So per 100 mils, if it is 5 grams or less of sugar, then big gold star, go for it. The closer to that, the better. A lot of the drinks you'll find will be 10, 12 grams or more, and it's, yeah, you might as well be drinking like Sprite or Coca-Cola at that point. It's just so much sugar. So 5 grams per 100 mils or less of sugars, and that's what you want to aim for kombuchas and other drinks.
Right. Someone asking if we can share the recordings of these sessions. Yeah, absolutely. As I say, it's being recorded. We'll upload it onto YouTube. So if there's people, family members that you think might be interested that aren't actually signed up to do Give It Up, feel free to share these with them. They can sign up, you know, at a later date. Yeah, it's all about creating awareness. We've got another question here. What about fresh dates and dried fruits?
That would be a no. I mean, obviously, you know, dates are very yummy. And there's a reason that a lot of people use them in like the natural baking that, you know, we do, where you don't have any added sugars, because they're so sweet. They make the baking sweet. So yeah, it's just a very high concentration of sugars. So if you're giving up sugars, I would avoid those. You also lack a lot of the fiber and water content that you have in normal fruits.
Right. Okay. I think that's it for the questions at the moment, unless there's any others. So yeah, thanks Sean for your time. Really appreciate you coming on board. As I say, tune in every Monday night. We've got a series of webinars coming up with more deep dive into cravings next Monday night, same time, and the one after that on the gut microbiome, and then following that, sleep. Now at this point I was going to take you through just some tips on your fundraising page, but if you were with us at the beginning of the webinar, I had a few technical issues sharing my screen, so I will make a separate little video, a sort of how-to video, which I'll share with everybody on tips for navigating around your fundraising page. But I just want to pick up on something that Sean said during his talk, which was about keeping accountable and motivation. And we've truly been inspired through the Facebook group. If you're not in the Facebook group, check your welcome email. There's a link to that. Lots of support in the group, but we've truly been inspired by everybody sharing their stories into the group of why they're taking part in this challenge and why it's important to them. So as Sean mentioned, keep that top of mind, but from an accountability point of view, there's nothing like having a donation on your page for keeping you accountable through the month. So I'd encourage everyone to share your fundraising page, be accountable to your friends and family, let them know what you're doing. You're more likely to stick to it then, and hopefully they'll jump on and give you a donation, and that will keep you honest through the month. I did sugar-free last year myself. I was a real sugar fiend. I used to love my chocolates and cakes and biscuits, and I'm really happy to say that I've stayed largely sugar-free as a result of what I've learned from Sean last year. So I'd really encourage you to keep tuning into these webinars. You'll learn so much from Sean. And when you understand what's happening in your guts, it really motivates you to keep the changes you're making this month for the long term. So thank you again for getting on board. I think this year, when I last looked, we had over 1,000 people signed up to give it up through the month of March. As I say, we're aiming to raise $350,000 to support New Zealanders with gut cancers, to provide access to clinical trials for these people and give them options and inform future research to hopefully improve survival rates. So huge thanks for your involvement. Any questions that you haven't answered in this group, or if you think of something after the event, need help with your fundraising, questions for Sean, just drop me an email at sue@gutcancer.org.nz, or post in the Facebook group and we'll jump on and help you out. So best of luck for your month ahead, and we will see you this time next week, 7 o'clock, for the session on cravings. Oh, I think we've got one more question come through. Let's just have a look at that. Right, that's a really good question from Rich. How long will it take the sugar cravings to stop? That's a really good question, and I'm not going to lie, when I did it last year, it was really hard for the first week and a half.
That sounds about spot on. So about the 2-week mark is when you have a lot of your sugar cravings desist. And the reason for that is because it takes about 2 weeks for all of the cells in your gut to have completely renewed. So have, died off and been grown from scratch again. So every 2 weeks, your entire gut system is renewed. And because of that, it means every 2 weeks, whatever you were eating for the past 2 weeks, or how you were treating your gut for the past 2 weeks, will show, it'll show a fortnight later, whatever you're doing now. So you give up sugar, you take care of your gut, and just like Sue said, first week and a half really hard in that time when everything is processing, but after the week and a half, 2 weeks, that's when, they won't disappear completely, but that's when all of a sudden you can wake up and it's not your body growling at you for sugars anymore. It's a much quieter inner voice that's coming through. So 2 weeks, significant change. 2 weeks after that, it's a completely different world inside you. So it doesn't take long.
Right. Okay. Well, there are no more questions coming through. As I say, best of luck to everyone. We will see you next week for the webinar on cravings. All the best for the first week of Give It Up. Bye for now.
Yeah, thanks everyone.